You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got some consequential developments here in one of the most watched cases in the entire country. Can you explain what that update was?
Yeah, Brian, there's a lot going on in the Abrego Garcia case. So it was just 48 hours ago that Abrego Garcia walked out of a Tennessee prison a free man after he and his lawyers beat Donald Trump's DOJ lawyers when they tried to detain him in his criminal case in Tennessee. And he won that motion and a judge ordered his release. So Abrego Garcia over the weekend traveled to Maryland. He went home. He was with his wife and his family. And Monday, what happened? Well, he went and checked in with ICE as he was required to do. And of course, they grabbed him and detained him again. And it looks like this detention may be unlawful. Why do I say that? Well, we are already back in court on Monday, this time in Maryland, in front of Federal District Court Judge Senes. Again, our viewers may remember that it was Judge Senes that was the one who ordered the Trump administration to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from the El Salvadoran prison that he had been unlawfully sent to and returned to the U.S. And Judge Senes' order was affirmed by the Circuit Court of Appeals and affirmed by the Supreme Court. And that is eventually part of what brought Abrego Garcia back to the United States. But then they trumped up this criminal case down in Tennessee. And for the time being, Abrego Garcia beat the DOJ on that one. But now they've grabbed him and put him back in deportation detention. Well, back in court today. And boy, we learned a whole lot about what the Trump administration has been doing in recent hours. For example, here is what they told Abrego Garcia's lawyers. They said, if Abrego Garcia pleads guilty to the federal criminal charges down in Tennessee, you know what we'll do for him? We'll still deport him, and he'll be eligible, subject to deportation. We'll let him go to Costa Rica, and we'll let him be a free man in Costa Rica. However, if he doesn't plead guilty to the trumped-up charges in Tennessee, which, Brian, he maintains his innocence of those charges. And when I read the indictment down there, it looks like some trumped-up bullshit. It does not look like they have the goods to convict Abrego Garcia. But they said, listen, you defy us, you refuse to plead guilty, you demand your constitutional right to a jury trial in your case in Tennessee, well then, we are going to stuff you on a plane and send you to Uganda. Basically, they are threatening to send him to a more dangerous place. We'll talk about that in a minute if he exercises his constitutional right to a trial. You know, they just can't stop violating Abrego Garcia's constitutional rights, due process, and otherwise. The good news, Brian, is Judge Senes would have none of it. And here is just a very little bit of what she said in that Maryland courtroom today. Judge Senes says she has serious concerns about the claim that DOJ pressured Abrego into a guilty plea by offering him deportation to Costa Rica and threatening deportation to Uganda if he refused. And here is what Judge Senes said, and this is good news for Abrego Garcia and for the rule of law. She told the DOJ lawyer, a flunky named Drew Ensign, quote, your clients, meaning the Department of Justice and the Trump administration, your clients are absolutely forbidden at this juncture to remove Mr. Abrego Garcia from the continental United States. And the DOJ lawyer said, Your Honor, yes, we certainly understand that. So as of right now, he is again protected by Judge Senes' court order, and I believe they're going to be heading back to court on Wednesday to begin to have a hearing and hash some of this out.
Just a quick note for everybody watching. If you want to stay on top of legal news like this, please subscribe to both of our channels. The links are in the post description of this video. Great way to support our work, completely free, and a great way to support independent media. Well, you know, Glenn, we've been here before where a judge says that a certain person in this country can't be disappeared to a foreign country, and the administration has opted to do it anyway, despite members of the DOJ in the courtroom saying, yes, we understand this was an administrative error that somebody was sent. In this case, you have a prosecutor saying we completely understand. And so we've been here before. What happens in the event that Trump decides to say, fuck it, we're sending him away anyway, and I'd rather apologize than ask permission?
Yeah, and I wish I could say I would be surprised if they did it, given the direct, language and the concession by the DOJ lawyer today, but nothing surprises me regarding Donald Trump and Pam Bondi's willingness to violate the constitutional rights of pretty much anybody. So what would happen is, again, we would be back in criminal contempt territory, hearings would be held, and DOJ or ICE or Homeland Security officials would run the risk of being held in contempt and potentially prisoned. But, as you say, we've seen this movie before, and it seems like we never make much progress on the contempt front. For any number of reasons, things begin to sort of backslide, or maybe an appeals court tells somebody like Chief Judge Jeb Boasberg in D.C. Federal District Court, when he tries to move forward with contempt proceedings against the Trump administration and Trump administration officials, a panel two Trump-appointed judges say, no, we don't think you should move forward with contempt proceedings. So listen, Brian, we are in a dogfight. The rule of law and the Constitution seems to hang by a thread every day, and the Trump administration is forever trying to cut that thread. And those of us who are actually loyal to the rule of law and the Constitution, who are still working within the system, are fighting to keep that thread intact and build it stronger.
Glenn, we've spoken about the prospect of contempt, but always present with this threat of contempt is the fact that Trump has the pardon power that he's been proven to abuse, that he's perfectly content to wield without any reservation. And so isn't there always that get out of the jail free card that he can send his flunkies into court, lie to the judge if they need to, ultimately get hit with the potential of a contempt charge, but then you've got this get out of jail free card with Donald Trump and the pardon power at the end of the day. And so what incentive is there for any of these DOJ flunkies or DOJ top brass or even Trump himself to comply with any of these rulings that they don't feel comports with their political ideology when they've got this escape hatch with a Trump pardon that, again, he's perfectly content to wield if he needs to?
Brian, you are spot on. There is nothing stopping the lawlessness that Donald Trump can pardon, right? Pam Bondi and the folks that she's sending in to these courtrooms to do Donald Trump's dirty bidding rather than representing the interests of the American people, which is what DOJ lawyers are duty-bound to do. I did it for decades.
Yeah.
These folks are probably, in part, willing to go into court and run the risk of doing something for which they will need a pardon because they know that as long as Donald Trump is in power, he at least has the ability to get them out of criminal hot water. What he doesn't have the ability to do, Brian, and I think this is why we see so few DOJ lawyers actually going into court. It is the usual suspects, the people who, seem to have real ethical shortcomings that are going into court in these cases. What they are at risk of having happen is losing their law license, as many Trump-affiliated attorneys have lost their license to practice law before them. But let me just circle back to something, because it is so infuriating to this old prosecutor that they are essentially trying to threaten somebody into pleading guilty to something that he maintains he didn't do. And I sure have not seen adequate evidence supporting the criminal charges down in Tennessee. They're like, okay, Costa Rica. Look, we all know Costa Rica, right? Lots of expats there. People vacation in Costa Rica. Let's have a look at what the U.S. State Department says about a travel advisory to Uganda. Quote, this is on the State Department's website. Reconsider travel to Uganda due to crime, terrorism, and laws targeting persons on the basis of sexual orientation. Actually sounds a lot like the U.S. these days. Exercise increased caution due to potential security risks and the unpredictable nature of public demonstrations. This includes demonstrations by political groups leading up to January to February 2026 elections. And they cap it all off with, there remains a threat of terrorist attacks in Uganda. So they are telling, and they're saying it right out in the open to Abrego Garcia and his lawyers. Defy us, demand your trial, exercise your constitutional rights. It's off to Uganda with you.
What would we call it if it happened? You know, look, I understand that the Trump administration feels like this is a different scenario because this has to do with somebody who is not an American citizen, and he's become the face, basically, of the fight against immigrants in this country. But what would it be like? What would happen if an American citizen was contending with the same issue, was framed with some crime that they didn't commit, and told that if they didn't plead guilty to this crime that they maintain, that they contend they didn't commit, that they would be disappeared to a country in Africa?
What would happen? Well, listen, it's hard to answer the question, what would happen, because you and I and our viewers, we look at things through the lens of the rule of law and the Constitution. So what should happen is an American citizen can't be deported, right? However, can an American citizen be disappeared by a runaway criminal government, executive branch, president of the United States? Sure. And I think some of that may be going on under our noses. But listen, there is some good news, because at every turn, Brian, Abrego Garcia and his terrific team of lawyers have fought Donald Trump's dirty DOJ officials and won. I mean, he won again on Monday when Judge Sini's ordered what I just read. The United States of America will not deport Abrego Garcia. We're going to get him back in here for his hearing so we can honor his constitutional due process rights, and he gets his, opportunity to be heard in court, not disappeared. So listen, if Abrego Garcia can continue to fight and win, he fought his way out of a terrorist prison in El Salvador, where he was tortured by, according to the court filings, being made to kneel on a concrete floor every night from 9 p.m. to 6 p.m. And if anybody fell from exhaustion, they were beaten. He fought his way through that. You know what? If Abrego Garcia can fight and win, goodness knows the rest of us should be fighting.
Well, of course, we will stay on top of this case, along with any other legal news that breaks right now. For those who are watching, if you'd like to follow along and support our work, it's completely free to do so. Please subscribe to our channels. I'm going to put the links right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Again, a great way to show some support for our work. It doesn't cost anything, and to show some support for independent media more broadly. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.